Welcome back to Echoes and Edges, the Broken and Beautiful podcast. I'm Patria, your host of Echoes and Edges and the founder of the Broken and Beautiful Collective. Before we begin today, we're just going to mark that it's a new year. We are today entering 2026. Because we're starting fresh with a new year, we're just going to take a minute first to ground into our place. And then after I do the grounding, I'm going to introduce you to our topic for the year and for today, and introduce you to my friend and colleague. So to begin, let's just ground. This is for me and Janet, who I'll introduce to you in a minute as well. But just let your feet press gently into the floor beneath you. Notice the place where your body is supported right now, whether that's a chair or your feet if you're walking, the ground beneath you, the steady surface holding your weight. Take a slow breath in through your nose or mouth and let it out gently. See if you can make the exhale a little longer than the inhale. As we start this year off, just try to put your car in neutral, remembering that there's not much that needs to be fixed. We don't need to understand everything, and we don't need to be anywhere else than where we are right now. And so I just want to welcome you into presence, into your own self, into your own life, into your own integrity. And if it feels okay, place a hand somewhere on your body, your chest, or your stomach, or your leg, and just notice your breath moving beneath your hand, or the solidness of your body underneath your hand, that this is real and true. And today's conversation is about rebuilding connection with ourselves and with others. So as we begin, just notice that you are allowed to be here just as you are. You don't need to manage whatever it is that comes up, whatever feelings or thoughts come up. You don't need to manage or silence it. All of it's welcome here. And then just take one more gentle breath. And when you're ready, let's go. So opening this year of 2026, our theme is Rise with Us, Voices that Lead, Stories that Heal. And we have the year broken down into quarters and into weeks. And every week we're going to be bringing you a different aspect of this theme. So this is the headwaters of our theme this year. It's the headwaters of everything we're going to be doing. It's an invitation to rise with us. And I like to think of us as collectively as, of course, our organization, the Broken and Beautiful Collective here, all of the coaches and counselors and spiritual directors that are here working, but us as a people, as humans together. And so rising with us, voices that lead, stories that heal, to me, it gives a sense of direction. It gives a sense of hope. It gives a theme to work under. And so as you think about your theme for the year, maybe you want to borrow some of those feelings or thoughts, or maybe you just want to jump on and listen to our podcast every week and see what we are doing. Under that theme of Rise with Us, Voices that Lead, Stories that Heal, it felt important for me to start with someone with me that I know well. We've been through a few things together, my friend and colleague Janet Friesen. And we're going to be talking about rebuilding connection to ourselves and how to start trusting ourselves again. And Janet is a therapist. She's a licensed mental health provider. And Janet and I met maybe 2010-ish, probably something along those lines. So we've known each other for a while in different ways, but really got to know each other more about 2017 when I came on staff to the local church where we were both attending at the time, and we began working together, and has been a great friend since then. But Janet is also a great therapist and a wise woman. And so I'm excited to have this discussion about reconnecting to ourselves with her. Janet believes, as a therapist, that working with you and your goals is important, and they're unique for every person. Janet is a certified clinical partner specialist through APSATS, which has to do with betrayal trauma, particularly in marriage or intimate relationships. She's also EMDR trained, and she really loves to support women who've experienced betrayal trauma in their marriage due to pornography or affairs. Janet is passionate about empowering women to work on what is within their control to maximize their mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And she comes from a Christian background and really works with her clients to collaborate what is right for them in terms of the losses or the issues or the harm. So, Janet, would you add anything to that intro that I just shared? And welcome, by the way. So glad to have you here today.
Yes, thank you. It's good to get to do this with you. And I don't think that there's anything else I would add. I think you summed it up pretty well.
Many of us were raised spiritually, culturally, relationally with a message of some sort of message that, whether it's overtly taught or covertly taught, that our inner world can't be trusted. Like we ought to question our inner world. We ought to question our feelings, our intuition, our instincts. And again, it's not always through direct teaching, but somehow or another, many of us get taught that, whether it's through tone, through ways we've been corrected, maybe through ways that we feel fear.
Yeah, I just think I would emphasize that a lot of times sometimes it is overt, but a lot of times it's just we pick it up.
Would you feel comfortable or willing to share anything about how you were taught about your inner voice, or how you came to know your inner voice, your instincts or emotions? How did you come out of childhood or young adulthood thinking about that?
I think I would say that for the most part, it wasn't the inner voice, feelings, emotions weren't talked about a whole lot. It was more about harmony, getting along with everyone, making sure we lived at peace with everyone. Those kinds of messages were definitely things that I picked up growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's such a good point. It's the living at peace with everyone. I would say that really lands for me too, as part of what I sort of caught, or to be hospitable, to make people around me comfortable. I was actually overtly taught that. I was taught it was my job to make sure everybody was comfortable around me, So both of us came in with an implication of something was our responsibility about the people around us.
Right. And I think the kind of living at peace with everyone, and whether that was taught, I certainly picked it up that was more on my side, that it was my responsibility to live at peace with everyone, even if somebody else wasn't necessarily trying to live at peace with me, then it landed on my shoulders, that I needed to do what I could to keep the peace, accommodate, make sure everything went smoothly.
I mean, that's so important what you just said, whether or not the other person had the same goal, that this was something to be established. So in that context, like how did you come to understand then what peace meant? What was, and we can maybe talk about this later too, but I think it would be good then to talk about what we understand peace to be now. But what did peace mean at that point, do you think?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it meant like lack of conflict.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're living with a person that's highly conflict oriented, that makes your work double or triple to keep the peace.
Right. And I think growing up and with a lot of my early friendships and, even into high school, college, I was around a lot of people who were similar to me. And so it worked because we were all operating from the same rule book, basically. But when it stopped working for me was being in a relationship with someone who didn't play by those same rules. Not that they were rules, but that wasn't their focus.
And was that surprising to you to find someone that didn't play by that same rule?
It was very surprising, very confusing. And I think that's what made it take a lot longer for me too, because I just couldn't comprehend that someone wouldn't be operating from that kind of same basis that I was and my family and other people, a lot of the people that I grew up with were operating from.
And by a lot longer, you mean to reconnect with yourself?
It took me a lot longer to even understand what was happening because I kept thinking, what's not working here and what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Because it must be me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it took a while for me to just even wake up to the realization that, and I had a few relationships that weren't that healthy, like a couple in college and then, past that. But where I would stay in those relationships because I just kept thinking I must be misunderstanding them, or maybe they're having a bad day and they're, this is just kind of a one-off behavior kind of thing. So it took me a lot longer, I think, to see the patterns, that it was a pattern, because I kept viewing maybe less than optimal behavior as just like a fluke instead of a pattern.
Well, and I'm thinking the verse that's coming to my mind, since we're both from Christian backgrounds, the verse that's coming to my mind is be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, and how this kind of training into us didn't really teach us how to be wise as a serpent. It emphasized harmless as a dove, I would say, in a very real sense. So I'm hearing you say that you learned how to adapt, how to make concessions for people, how to live by grace on their behalf, and how to give them all the chances in the world, to kind of behave differently.
Right. Yeah. And I think the verse that it keeps coming to my mind is, if at all possible, as long as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone.
Yeah.
And that whole thing about as much as it depends upon you. And I took that to mean that it always depends on me.
Yeah, which feels, as you know, I'm a story coach, and that feels so in-storied, and also personality. We're both Enneagram type 9s. So there's this ability to sort of pack on like grunt work, like there's just this ability to pack on really hard work. And sometimes people intentionally or even unintentionally pack it on us, and we just take it, and neither one realizes it until somebody realizes it. I mean, it sounds like a silly statement, but so all of that feels like it's at play. How did this realization, and maybe it wasn't even a realization in real time, but how did this impact or how did you come out of this season thinking about your intuition, your instincts, your own needs even?
I really I don't think I even realized I had intuition because I pushed it down so much. And so that was really a part of once I got into counseling and started doing work and being in group and starting to really pay attention and realize, oh, I do have intuition, and paying attention to my feelings, because I was so used to pushing those feelings down and be concerned about what other people felt and making sure they were okay, that I really wasn't aware of my own feelings, my own emotions, intuition, for the most part. there were times when I would get this twinge that something doesn't feel right, but I would just push it down because I was trying to be a good person and a good Christian and being at peace with people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's something about, just as you were talking before we segue to the next question, I was just in my mind's eye, I was seeing like being at peace with all men didn't include you. Like it wasn't in your view to be at peace with yourself, right? So that would have naturally caused you to have to tamp down anything like that came up, I would think. I can really identify with that too in my own way, even though our stories are different in many ways. So what happened for you to the degree that you feel safe and comfortable sharing publicly? What happened to start shifting you back toward yourself a little bit more?
I mean, things work until they don't work. I mean, that sounds, again, like a no-brainer, but at some point it just felt like this isn't working anymore. I'm miserable. I don't understand why I'm miserable because I'm trying to do all the right things, but things aren't changing. And it did get to a point where I was starting to really feel miserable and notice that I was feeling miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you have the same experience. I can't tell you how many times I hear women say that, some version of that, where something just finally hit, like I finally hit a wall, the last straw. I didn't expect it. I didn't anticipate something was changing to that degree, but something wasn't working the way that my system, the way that I had been sort of led to believe would work. So like in this case, we're talking about be at peace with all men. It wasn't working.
Yeah. And looking back, I really don't know that I can pinpoint. I mean, I'd have to really think about it, about when that happened. But I do know it just, at some point, it wasn't working for me anymore. I realized I wasn't doing well. And it could be, I do remember talking with a friend and, how we can lean on our friends and kind of vent to our friends. And I remember this friend saying something to me. She said, Janet, I really love being your friend. I want to be your friend, but I don't know what to do with all of this. I think you need to see a counselor.
Wow.
And that was probably what did it, was her kind of reflecting back to me kind of the distress that I was in, and that it was big and it was feeling too big, for me and for her. And then I did get into counseling then at that point and started working on things. And that's when things really started to shift, because then I started learning tools and understanding to pay attention, to myself, to my feelings, to my intuition.
I mean, that's really striking to me because there's a lot of integrity at play in that interaction between both of you, your friend and you. And I just want to hover over that for a minute, because that courage of your friend to say, I'm not enough for you here, but what you're bringing is so important that somebody needs to help you, but the integrity and courage to say, I can't do this. I don't have what I need to help you. But then also your integrity to hear her and to reach out for counseling, which it sounds like that was your first foray into therapy.
Well, I'm just trying to think when that would have been. I'm thinking that was probably around 25 years ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. And it's gotten me thinking about just how hard, well, it's how hard it is to recognize that I'm in a boiling pot of water, because it heats up so slowly for all of these different reasons. Like most relationships that end up in a state where, in my case, where I'm not able to connect with my inner voice, certainly not able to use it, it didn't start out feeling this way. It started out feeling better than it did, even if not great. It didn't feel bad. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been drawn to it, right? And then how long it can take to even become aware of that, but then how much, again, I keep thinking of the word integrity and not honor, even though that's true, but I mean like integration, like wholeness. It takes a level of wholeness to be able to act on our own behalf in a moment that's really hard because there's fragmentation going on, right? We're fragmented from hurt or heartbroken from hurt.
I think initially I felt hurt. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was doing something wrong. Maybe it was more that than being hurt. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm being a bad friend.
Yes.
And so I think there was a little bit of that, but thankfully that didn't last too long because I knew she was for me. I knew we had been friends for years. I knew she cared about me, and she was even saying that as she was talking to me about that. And so I think there was that initial feeling of, I'm not doing this right, I'm doing something wrong. But then I think shortly, like right on the heels of that, was kind of this relief that what I was going through was being seen, and that it was being validated that this isn't okay. You're not okay. What you're going through is really hard and you need help. And so there was some sort of a relief in that as well. And then, I reached out, I got the name of a therapist, really connected with her. I was so thankful for her. And she just, that was such a great experience then. And it just felt like I was finally able to exhale. And, being in her office, getting that support. I mean, it was hard work and I was doing the work. But it felt so supportive too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about therapeutic goals. No matter what the no matter what the helping relationship is, whether it's therapy like you do, or story coaching like I do, or spiritual direction, or friendship. A good friend. That kind of moment that you're describing, where it's like a oh shoot moment. Did I just do something wrong? Am I bad? It's an increase of our shame, right? Our shame gets exposed in a moment, but it's then held with love. And it's the only way, I talk about this a lot in story coaching, that's the only way to shift the narrative inside, is to have that shame seen by eyes that care, and in a trusting, relational dynamic where somebody's actually for you, where you're believed, where you're not only believed, but you're understood and seen and named. Like there's relief. I can't understand all of it. Like, here are my limits. There's such a relief in that being named well with a good friend, or a therapeutic relationship, whatever that is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's so hard to move toward the shame. That's why I want to hover over that, because we all want to avoid the shame of powerlessness, the shame that we might be, stuck chasing our tail. That's the way I think of it, is like I, chase my tail and I whap my funny bone on my elbow against the wall all the time, but I still do it because it's what I've been taught. I'm committed,
Right.
to following it through, and so then I get caught in that. It's like, oh, I don't know how to help you keep running around in the circle. But at the same time, what a relief to feel a sense of, okay, I can stop doing this. At least I can consider it.
Right.
There's a relief in that too.
Something that just came to my mind was shortly after I started counseling and I got involved in a support and recovery group and started doing work there. And I remember it had probably just been about 6 months. And I was, going for a walk with the same friend again and doing things. And I just remember her making the comment about how dramatically I had changed in that 6 months and how she could see that. And that was really helpful for me too, because I knew I had been doing work. I knew it was hard. It was emotional. But for her to be able to say that she could see the growth and she could see the change and that it was pretty dramatic, it really helped too, to have that feedback, to have that input, that perspective from someone who knew me well, because we can get caught up in our own heads and we can either not see our progress or we can think we're doing better than we are. And so to have someone outside of ourselves to speak into that, I just remember that being really helpful for me too. And to realize, oh, I have, and then also for me to realize then I am starting to feel better. I am starting to do things differently. And it's not just evident to me, it was evident to her too.
Oh my goodness. He's just said so many important things right there. I wish we could hit all of the bullet points again, but people can rewind and listen to everything you just said again. And I would encourage that. And the need for a witness, a compassionate witness to walk with us, because like you said, on the inside, my next question was going to be, how did it feel on the inside? And you answered that naturally, which was you just didn't have any gauge yet. Your gauge is off kilter now because you're doing something different. Mm-hmm. And so to have a person that can mirror back, reflect back what they're seeing is so meaningful. It reminds me of my friend once said to me, I don't know anything except I feel better inside. I feel better. And it just did something in my insides. It was like, oh yeah, me too. I feel better. I feel more at ease with myself than I have ever felt before. So that comes to my mind. As you started choosing well-being, so it was a slow choosing over the old patterns. So familiar ways of doing things, be at peace with all men. For me, it would have been be harmless as a dove, whatever that was. But now something's shifted. You're choosing well-being, you're going to a therapist, you're having a good friend reflect back to you. So from that perspective, and now as you look back over that time, what about the old dynamics felt safe and kept you there for the amount of time that they did, even when now you can see they weren't the best for you?
Yeah, I think I started doing work. I started doing my own, just processing, paying attention to things, but I was still really strongly stuck in that living at peace, avoiding conflict. I mean, it took me years, of continuing to live in that space of, I was starting to become more aware of my internal world and what I needed and getting the support that I needed from friends, from a therapist, from a group. But I was also really locked into overall still that avoiding conflict. So I would say that continued. That still felt the safest was, yeah, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm learning these new things about myself, I'm understanding more. And it still feels safest to continue to make myself small, basically, and to push myself down a little bit and just do what I need to do to avoid conflict.
What is it, or what was it, what is/was it about conflict that felt so final and fatal, do you suppose?
I think part of it was I was not really exposed to conflict in my home growing up. There just wasn't, I didn't observe conflict. If there was, it wasn't around us as kids for the most part. I don't think at all. I'll just say for the most part, because maybe there was some, but I don't know. I just remember there wasn't a lot of conflict in our home. We got along, and with friends at school and things like that. And so getting into a relationship where there was a lot of conflict, I think it just felt scary because it was so unknown. Yeah. And it didn't feel peaceful. And the whole point was to live at peace.
Right, right. From my own perspective, I would say, and we've talked about this, but I would say I came from the opposite, where there was so much conflict in my home. At least that's the way I read it. Now, if you ask my brothers, they might tell you something totally different, but everybody's experience is their own. And for me, it was so much conflict all the time that I came to be the grounding rod for conflict. And so, in my way of managing conflict, I would just go straight in to the to the conflict to manage it, and sort of bring my peace. Dang it, I'm going to bring my peace, and that's the way that I avoided conflict, is to go toward it and to impact it. So even though, and I am going into Enneagram here a little bit because I'm such an Enneagram lover, but there is such a difference in the way, as two type nines here, that we avoid conflict, that we came to avoid conflict. And on one hand, it's two sides of the same coin, but it's about conflict. And so it is for anybody, but I do think that there's this particularity for Enneagram type nines to be at risk of over functioning where conflict is concerned. For you maybe got quieter and just worked harder under the surface. For me, I worked harder overtly, to try to create peace. But either way, it created this sense of over functioning, and codependency in many ways. So now, since we've both done a lot of work, we've come through different relationships, and we've come through, we're all better now, right?
We're definitely in a better place.
Yes. But so when that old tug starts for you, how do you manage it? What helps you choose well-being or health, or however you think of that?
I think now I'm able to notice when there is conflict, and I can pause. I can just take a few breaths. I mean, sometimes, just like the grounding you did at the beginning, I think when I talk to clients about just taking a few breaths, it sounds like that's like nothing. Why even bother? But there is something about just pausing and taking a few breaths to get grounded, to come back to myself, to ask myself, what is it that I really need right now? What am I really feeling? That is so important to me. So I think coming back to my breath, noticing, and then also knowing and giving myself permission to do something or to not do something. But even if I don't do something, I'm being intentional about not doing it. It's not my default. That I'm choosing intentionally, like, this isn't worth it. I'm not going to speak up in this situation because I know it's not going to change anything. Where other times I might choose to do something, even if it doesn't change anything, I might feel like I need to, but I need to take that pause, which in some moments, if I'm in a conversation or something, it literally might be just taking a few breaths and pausing to think. And in other situations, that could be a longer, I might be taking a few hours or a few days or even a few weeks, to consider and think about something. But I think that pausing and reflecting and noticing what's happening in my body right now, what am I feeling? What's coming up for me? And what is it that I need to do? What am I being prompted to do or to not do? But to be intentional instead of just sliding into a default mode.
I'm always careful about using really highly spiritual language in the context of healing. At the same time, I feel like breathing is spiritual warfare 101. Like, it is literally death defying to take a breath. And it is so important, and so different to breathe instead of hold your breath. And if listeners, if that's hard to understand, just observe. How often during the day are you holding your breath? You know, it's likely a lot if you're a human. You know, I mean, it's just likely a lot. And it can be for different reasons. It isn't for everyone because they're avoiding conflict or even because they're in difficult situations. But that pause and that breath just helps expand the realization that the world is still on its axis right now. You know, there might be danger. If you're being chased by a bear, you need to run. And there are some people that are chronically in that kind of danger. But for certainly us, you know, us in Western culture and for many people around the globe, there is a season of safety, or a moment of safety. Or a place on your body, the tip of your nose or your little finger that feels at ease, even if nothing else does. And it's just helpful to remember that's both and that actually then helps us to build in self-trust, right? When we can pause and feel our presence, like, here's my body, here I'm alive, here I can take a breath, here I can make a choice. It actually builds trust within ourselves that we may not even know we're missing, you know, for whatever reason, and in the hustle we disconnect from. So along with breathing, what other rhythms or practices have you found helpful to continue to come into more and more of that expansive, abundant place? And let's talk too about, what does peace mean now to you?
A big one for me is speaking of being at peace with who I am and how God created me. I mean, as an Enneagram 9, as an introvert, that I need more downtime. And I think for so many years I felt guilty. I felt like I need to be doing this and that and the other thing, and, you know, get involved and volunteer and do all the things. And especially in this season of life now, as an empty nester, and I do have a lot of space and time, but that's been really important to me to protect that and to keep that, because I still could get really busy and involved. And a huge thing has been realizing I need a lot of space in my life. I need a lot of downtime to recharge my battery, that I could, you know, be seeing a lot more clients. I could be volunteering a lot of places. You know, there's so many other things that I could be doing, but then I wouldn't be able to do what I am doing well. And so recognizing that and realizing, you know, for the most part, I have pretty slow start mornings. You know, I get up, I don't have to, you know, get out the door at 7 a.m. or something like maybe I used to in some periods of life when I had a job that started at 8. And so I can take that time, and I need to, and I'm really intentional about that. And I think creating rhythms for my life, like a daily rhythm, kind of thinking about what do I need. And so for me, that's getting up in the morning. It's, you know, reading my Bible, praying, journaling, reflecting, having that kind of quiet time and a slow start, because I need to be filled up for the day. Just like we talk about, you need to eat breakfast so you have energy for the day. Well, we also need, for me, you know, as an introvert, as an Enneagram 9, I need that time in the morning to fill up internally, so that I have something to give to my clients, or I also teach part-time to my students or whatever, or to friends, you know, if I'm getting together with a friend. But that's so important. And I would say that that's been a huge practice that I've really developed, especially over the last few years, after being in a program in a class where we were developing kind of a spiritual rhythms for our life, and looking at that, what does that look like on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, quarterly basis? And that's really been huge to me, is to look at that, and to have that kind of a start to the day. And then even in my evenings, just having a slower evening, you know, being able to just unwind, you know, do some reading or something creative, before I go to bed at night, just so that I can charge my battery up a little bit before I go to sleep at night, and then hopefully I get charged up while I'm sleeping too. But yeah, just having that intentional time has been huge for me, and that's been very grounding to me. I think in one of the classes that I took, one of the instructors said something about, what is it that you need to do? You can have this great plan, but some days are just crazy. But what at a minimum do you need to do to feel human? And I just really like that, because sometimes there might not be time for me to do my whole thing that I typically do in the morning, but I at least need to do like 5 or 10 minutes of that, even if I don't have 30 minutes, or sometimes I take longer than 30 minutes to do that. That's been really helpful for me.
That's beautiful. And I know I've learned a lot about rhythms from you, and putting practices into your life at the expense of other things that I think I would have I wouldn't have thought to do on my own. That placement of importance on those practices and rhythms has really been meaningful to me. It's been a great way for me to learn. And it's also, as you know, Janet, I had some really significant health issues a few years ago that really changed my life, and I in difficult ways in terms of how my body functions. And so it's caused me a full stop in the mornings. Like I have a certain amount of time in the morning that I have to attend to my health in certain ways. And your modeling has really been something that I've cued off of to help me understand that this is actually hard but good. I wouldn't choose it for this way, but it's a good thing. So thank you for that, and for teaching me too. As you have so many things about rhythms and practices and coming back to connecting with self. And I'm so grateful for you. And so anything else you would say about connections or self-connecting or self-trust, or next steps for people that might be hearing this that just have no idea where to start? Like they don't feel good, something's not working, but they don't even know what a first step might be.
Yeah, I think being curious, approaching it instead of beating ourselves up, and we can all be really good at that. And I think it really does take a lot of work to shift out of being critical about ourselves and beating ourselves up to being curious. Like, what's going on with me? Why am I feeling this way? What are the things in my life, that don't feel great right now? And what might be helpful? And, maybe that's reaching out and talking with a friend and just saying, hey, can I process this with you? Because I'm just kind of feeling out of sorts. Or it could be, doing spiritual direction or story work or therapy or getting involved in a group or something like that. But I think community is so important. We need other people. And I think that's so whatever person that is for you, it doesn't have to be a professional. It can be a friend, to help you take that step. But I think overall being curious instead of beating ourselves up is huge. And for me, I know journaling is really helpful, and I know some people really like to journal and others don't. But that can be a helpful way too of uncovering what's going on, is just taking that time to reflect. Another thing I've been doing this for about 5 years now, for the most part, is at the end of every month, I will kind of look back over the month and have some reflection questions, like what went well, what did I learn, what am I most proud of, what did I accomplish, what would I want to change? And it just helps me to have that. I mean, that's like a monthly rhythm of kind of taking stock and thinking about, what do I want to shift, what do I want to change? So as I'm doing something daily, but then also monthly, kind of getting a little bit bigger picture look back can be helpful too. But I think reflection, being curious, and inviting other people into our lives to give input is huge.
Along the lines of what you said in the beginning there about curiosity instead of criticism toward yourself, just don't assume, listeners, that you're the problem. Don't make that assumption. assume that there might be something else wrong and that your dear system is trying to tell you that something is not okay. It doesn't mean everything has to end or everything is corrupt. And part of, I think, what keeps people from reaching out for community and support is that sort of black and white thinking that if I admit something's wrong, then I have to admit everything's wrong. And then, we're all going to get on a revolutionary bandwagon and everything has to end. And that's just not the case. It's all really about connecting to yourself and being honest and full of integrity about what is real, what is true, what's happening for you. And all of these things we've been talking about between rhythms and practices and breathing and journaling and movement. We didn't talk about movement, but moving the body can help to reconnect to what's real and true. And it doesn't have to mean that you're never going to move again. It doesn't ever mean that you're never going to get back in gear and be successful or move forward in your life, but it's just about pausing and, gathering. And I just said to a client recently, sometimes we get so caught up in trying to shove the gear shift into gear that we're just making it worse. We're making it like the gears are just, they're just grinding and we're stuck and the mud's flying and we're not really getting anywhere anyway. And so there's just kind of no loss, to just pulling the clutch or the gear shift back into neutral and just pausing for a minute and regrouping. And so maybe just think of it that way. And we acknowledge that there are just no easy answers, especially when we're talking about betrayal or of self or by others to us. And so just know that if you reach out to any of us, we are holding that with you. Like, we don't have an answer for you. We have witness, we have questions, we have people who have walked the road, their own road, done their own work. It might be a little different than yours, but people with integrity who are doing hard work or have done hard work. And so as we close, I want to leave just a few gentle questions. Where are you rebuilding trust with yourself or with someone you love? What old role or pattern of who you are have you maybe outgrown and you find yourself, bumping the funny bone on your elbow a lot, like you're hurt a lot and you keep doing the same things and you're not sure why? Maybe you've outgrown something. Where's that happening for you? What does maybe choosing something that's more in sync with well-being or kindness or curiosity for yourself look like just this week? Not in theory, but in practice. And it's a good time to take stock as we begin a whole new year. It's not to say, get yourself together. It's actually just to say pause. Again, it's this idea of pausing and breathing. I want to say too that if you've been taught to be afraid of yourself like I was, like I really thought I was my own enemy and that I had to manage my own emotions, like everything about me was a problem, is really at least how I caught what I was taught. And if you're in that camp as well and you're working on rebuilding connection with yourself, remember that it does actually take radical imagination to bridge the gap between what we understand and what we need. And so your inner voice is not the enemy. Your presence is not dangerous, and you do not have to disappear to be loved. Remember that rebuilding is slow and sacred work. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. And in fact, you really can't. At least that's my belief. You need community. We all do. But you need community that's safe in the sense that they will bring care and honesty, like the story that Janet shared today, the good friend who said, I really can't do this with you. I'm here for you, but we need somebody else involved. Join us next time on Echoes and Edges. We're going to have a lot of good stuff this year. Have a great week.